and welcome everybody. My name is Melanie Dizon and I'm the Director of Education at the Davis Phinney Foundation. And I'm really excited to have our friend Judy Long here today from San Francisco. Hi, Judy.
Hi, Mel.
It's great to have you. And we're going to be talking about helplessness and hope today and resilience, the best part about it. And Judy is going to be sharing all of the tools that she has in her little mindfulness tool belt, and they are excellent strategies that all of us can use when we come face to face with difficult emotions, difficult news, and many of the things that you deal with living with Parkinson's. So Judy, before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about who you are, where you work, and how you got into this work with people with Parkinson's and people with dealing with different illnesses and different life stages?
Yes, first of all, thank you so much, Mel, for inviting me to be here with everyone. Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be with you today. My name is Judy Long, as Mel said, and I work in San Francisco at a large teaching hospital, and I work in a particular clinic that is specifically a neuropalliative clinic for people living with Parkinson's and their families. And I love that it's a palliative care approach, which means we really are working with both the people living with Parkinson's and your family members. So we also work with a team, and as a team, we include a neurologist, that won't surprise you, but also a nurse, a social worker, a palliative care specialist, a social worker, and a chaplain. That's me. So it's like an army of us that are our own team or family meeting your family when we work together with what will really serve, what will help to make this journey more manageable.
Great, thank you. So let's dig in. The first question I have is, what do we mean when we talk about resilience? And what does that have to do with somebody living with Parkinson's?
Hey, well, thank you so much, Mel. It's such a great question. And I find that I am teaching this all the time, whether it's individually, one-on-one with people, or even in classes. So this idea of resilience, I think it's something that we all naturally have, and it's the way that we meet difficulties and are able to bounce back and get back to who we are again afterwards. And that's pretty much a natural strength that each one of us has. However, when we meet a circumstance or a situation that challenges us, that's difficult, maybe a little harder to pick ourselves up again, and we may benefit from understanding what are the parts of this thing we call resilience, and how can we strengthen the parts of it to make ourselves feel resilient again. So that's very much what I'd love to talk with you about today. So just starting from the very beginning, I want to share with you that I had the pleasure once of hearing a talk about, it was about mindful self-compassion, because that's another subject that I teach. But when I was at this talk, the speaker said, "Oh, and by the way, here are the components of resilience." And when I saw those, I went, oh my goodness, that's exactly what I see all the time with people. That's exactly what I want to be working with and teaching people. And the components were so interesting. None of these will surprise you. I think you'll all be able to say, oh yeah, I know what that one is. At least I hope you will. So let me just share with you what the three components were. The first one was this idea of having some sort of an intention or purpose in our lives. And I think a translation of that would be what really matters to me, which may be different from what matters to you living in your home with your family. But there's probably something that really guides your way. Maybe the most important thing to you is your family. Maybe the most important thing to you is a particular quality. It might be love or caring for other people. Maybe your most important quality might be something that comes from your faith, that leads you and guides you and nurtures you. But whatever it is, that's perhaps your really underlying intention and purpose in life. So that's one area that's called one of the components of resilience. It's what makes us strong. A second component has to do with the word connection, authentic connection. Isn't that interesting? And that has to do with the way we connect with friends, the way we connect with families, the way we connect with ourselves. So it has a lot to do with relationships and a lot to do with emotions. So we'll talk more about that in a little while, but that's the second one. The third component is the component of control, a sense of control. And I remember thinking, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that I'm somebody that always wants control of everything? No, doesn't mean that. They said, no, it really means self-efficacy. Can I do the things that I want to be able to do? Can I make things happen in the way that I feel is natural to me? It's that kind of sense of control. So those three areas are so wonderful because if we're aware of them, we can notice if they're being impacted and we can cultivate them and strengthen them. So I want to give you an example of what happens to those three elements or those three components if we get swept off our feet by something difficult, maybe a difficult diagnosis, or maybe someone in our family is having a difficult time, or maybe something in our own health, in addition to a diagnosis, is going awry right now. But whatever it is, if we get a little swept off our feet and our resilience is getting impacted, let's look at those three components. I don't know about you, but my sense of purpose, my sense of positive intention is pretty good. But when I get a difficult situation, I tend to forget what it is that strengthens me in the way of purpose. I just forget it because I'm too distressed, and that weakens me. So I may feel a sense of meaninglessness. Why is this happening to me? I've been a good person. How come this is going on? So that sense of meaninglessness is the opposite of a sense of or a sense of intention. And that can help that, I don't know if I want to say help, but it can make me feel more knocked off my feet than I would otherwise. When you look at the subject of the second component, which is connection, I can't promise that all of you are like this, but I can tell you for myself, if I have something difficult that comes up in my life, my first impulse is to go be by myself, to look for solitude. And I know this isn't true for everyone. I'm glad it's not true for everyone. I don't know that that's the best way to do things, but that's my way. And I mention it to you because I think it can be true for many people. It could be that you just want time alone. It could be that you don't want to be involved with other people right now because what you're going through is so difficult that the last thing in the world you want to do is start talking with them about it, or maybe you don't want to make them feel bad because of it. So my inclination, I'll just say it again, is to be by myself or to talk maybe just a few words and then to back off. And I think what happens with that, we'll talk more about it later, but I think it can lead eventually to a bit of isolation if it becomes chronic. Being alone for a little while is fine, but if we do it all the time, if we find we're not going out in public because we're embarrassed about the way we look, or we're not connecting with friends because we think they might feel sorry for us, or we're not including the people who are caring for us because we want to protect them from having to give us that care. I mean, there are lots of reasons we can do this. And I mention it to you at some length because it's our job to notice if that's happening and if it's happening a lot. So again, the researchers tell us that if it happens a little bit, no problem. But if it becomes pretty much the way we do business all the time, if it becomes chronic, it actually is not healthy. So we want to think about it and how we can connect in ways that feel acceptable to us, even when we want to be alone. Sometimes when I'm teaching it, I'll say to someone, who's one person you could stand to be around right now for a little while? And then limit the amount of time you're going to do it. You could say, actually, I'm throwing this little skill in the middle of my introduction, but you may want to keep this in mind. You might want to say to someone, I actually would love to see you. It's so great. I haven't seen you for the longest time. Could we meet on Tuesday between 2, or could you come over to the house on Tuesday between 2 o'clock and 2:30? I think a half hour is about what I'm up for right now. And I mention that to you. I have found for so many people that it's such a wise thing to do. Most of us don't think of it, for one thing. The other thing is it helps us. So if the other person's overstaying their welcome and we're getting tired, it takes care of our needing to say something we're afraid will offend them, because they've known from the beginning that the get together is only for a half hour. The other thing is it helps them. If they're sitting there with you and they don't want to offend you by leaving too soon, then they won't have to worry about that, because just, they'll just know that a half hour is up. You can remind them a half hour is up, and they'll leave, and they won't have to worry about feeling like they should stay, or else your feelings will get hurt. So the third component is the component of control. And that's the one where we feel like we can make things happen the way we want to do. And that's something that certainly gets impacted a lot when we have any kind of serious illness or chronic illness. And I think it's very true for Parkinson's. There are lots of things we used to be able to do that are things that we can't necessarily do the same way or do for ourselves anymore. And the opposite of having a sense of control, this won't surprise you, is a sense of helplessness. So that's the impactful side to resilience of having a serious illness. So again, I'll just say them again very briefly. The three components of resilience would be a positive intention, authentic connection, and a sense of control. And when we do have the ground pulled out from under us by a serious illness, those three elements may turn into a sense of meaninglessness, a sense of isolation, and a sense of helplessness. So those are the three areas I'd really like to use as our framework for our conversation today. And I'd love to give you some tools with which to work with all three of those to help build resilience right in the middle of everything that's going on in your lives right now. And they're not magic. They're not a magic wand. I wish they were. But I personally have found that they're really helpful. They help me out in my own life. And in fact, these are things that I wish we taught to children when they hit kindergarten and first grade, because these are skills we all can use in our lives. So please know that this is for everyone, not just for you people who are living with Parkinson's, or you caregivers who are living with someone who's living with Parkinson's. But I think this is true for your kids, your grandkids, your family members. Everyone can learn these if they wish to. So I'd like to start out with a very practical one. It's my favorite go-to starter thing to teach and to learn, because it is so immediately useful. And it also addresses a couple of those areas of resilience. It's something you can choose to do, so it has to do with choice versus sense of control. And it has to do with directing our attention and noticing what's happening. And although I didn't mention that as an element of resilience, in each one of those components, it's when we can notice what's happening that we can make a skillful choice to do something that will help. So in this case, I'm going to say to you, can you bring to mind, so using your memory, bring to mind sometime in the last week when you felt, I'm going to say mildly, not extremely, when you felt mildly or moderately stressed. Can you just think of a circumstance? It may be something that occurred during a doctor's visit, or perhaps during a conversation with someone, perhaps someone in your family, but sometime when you know, oh, that made me feel a little bit upset, or a little bit stressed, or a little annoyed, but whatever it was, you were feeling a sense of stress. And the exercise I'm going to give you is called grounding. Actually, I'll give you a few ways, and you can choose which one you like best. And grounding is so helpful because it helps actually alter or change the way our nervous system is working so that it begins to settle down. So when the nervous system understands that we're feeling upset or threatened by something, the nervous system gets very intense. It can make our heart start beating faster. It can make our breath even come a little faster. Even can make our shoulders go up. That's why I was just doing that a moment ago. It can make us just feel tense, tension, stressed, all of those things we're used to. It's our nervous system responding to something the nervous system perceives as threat. Uh-oh, something's wrong. And I better get ready to either fight or get out of the room or ignore it, do something that'll help. So that's the nervous system responding to stress. What we want to do is see if we can remind the nervous system, you know what, I'm actually okay. And you can settle down. And when we do that, then the nervous system goes into more of what we sometimes refer to popularly as going into a resilient zone. So the nervous system, instead of being stuck up high, like our shoulders are up high and we're stressed, it can be more relaxed. And you can think of it as a very gentle wave. I'll use my hand. So it's not all the way up on high. It's not all the way down on low. It's just more relaxed. And these grounding exercises help with engaging the nervous system so that in a way that will help it to be more relaxed. So let's start. I'm going to give you something to practice. I asked you to bring something to mind. I'm going to ask you to bring it to mind again. Recall that situation. And on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is the most stressful, I would like you to think of something that's at a level 4. So just moderately stressful, as I said earlier. Remember that again. And while you're thinking it, I'd like you to notice something. If you're sitting on a chair and your legs are crossed, could you please put your feet on the ground if that's comfortable for you? But even if you're lying down, this still works. I would like you to notice the physical sensation of the support of the bottom of the chair under your sit bones, under your buttocks. So I realize that was there all the time, but I'm asking you to notice it right now. So shift your attention again. Shift your attention, let it drop into your body. Notice the sensation of the support of the chair. If you do happen to be lying down, it's okay to notice the sensation of the support of the bed or of the pillow behind you. But I really want you to notice that physical sensation of support. I'll give you a second to notice that, because I know that's not what we usually do. All right, try it again. So again, let your attention come up to remember your stressful situation. And now allow your attention to drop into your body and notice the physical sensation of the support of the chair. And sustain your attention there for a second or two. Noticing the support of the chair. If you like, you could even do this if you were walking. You could shift your attention now to the soles of your feet on the floor. It's why I asked you to uncross your feet. And if you like, you could press your feet a little bit more towards the floor and notice the sensation of the support of the floor. Again, notice the sensation of the support of the floor. Even while you're sitting here, see if you can pretend you're walking in place while you're sitting. So let your left foot rise up, let your right foot go down toward the floor. Notice the sensation of the support of the floor. And then let your left heel come down and your right foot come up. And let your left ball of your foot come down and your toes. Notice the sensation of the support of the floor. Again, while you're doing that, what you're telling your brain in a very physical way is, I'm okay. I'm in a safe place. Nothing's going on in here that's not safe. So the brain, interestingly, doesn't really get it if we just talk to it with words. If we say, oh, brain, you can be relaxed now. I don't know if that works for any of you, but when I try it, my brain totally ignores me, doesn't do anything. But what the brain understands is if your body feels secure. And what this exercise does is it allows you to shift your attention to where your body feels secure. and feel supported. Your brain gets that, and the nervous system goes into that lovely resilient zone. So I will say that the beauty of this is that it works. The difficult part is you actually have to do it. You can't just say, I want myself to feel that way. You really need to shift your attention, notice the sensation of the support of the chair. And then your brain gets it. If you're already feeling super stressed before you do this exercise, you're already feeling really upset, I want you to remember your body is probably flooded with adrenaline and cortisol, those chemicals that make us ready to fight or run away, and they don't just disappear because we've done a grounding exercise. We need to give them a little bit of time. So you do the exercise, which really helps. I know this from personal experience, but also we need to give our bodies a little bit of time for the adrenaline and cortisol to settle down and dissipate. And you can do that by thinking of something that you enjoy. You can think about even imagining a beautiful tree or the ocean waves, or you might even like to listen to a favorite piece of music, or you might like to look at a picture on the wall, or you might like to imagine somebody that you love, or even a religious figure that is very important in your life. Any of those things are wonderful to go to help calm your mind while you're waiting. All you're doing is waiting. You're waiting for the adrenaline and cortisol to dissipate. So I'm going to give you a second part of that wonderful grounding exercise. You just learned one. It's good all by itself. You don't really need another part of it. But I'm going to put another part of it with you because I find this to be very helpful. I like to start it with a breath. I take a breath in a particular way, which I'll tell you in a moment. And then after I take that breath in, I don't worry about the out breath. I let it take care of itself. Excuse me. And during the out breath, I shift my attention into my body and I notice the sensation of the support of the chair. So let's do just the breath part. When you take your next breath in, I would like you to notice the sensation of, sound familiar? I want you to notice another sensation. Notice the sensation of the air coming into your nostrils, or into your throat and chest as well, if you like. But primarily, I want you to notice the air entering your nostrils. So when you're ready, next in-breath, breathe in. Notice the sensation of the air entering your nostrils. So I hope you could notice it. Let's try it again. The next in-breath, breathe in and notice. Okay, the idea is to feel the air entering your nostrils. One more time. Breathe in and notice. Good. Now we'll put them together. So breathe in and notice now. And allow your attention to shift and notice the sensation of the support of the chair. So it's like a 1-2 punch. So do it again. On the next in-breath, breathe in. Notice the sensation of the air entering your nostrils. And during the out-breath, shift your attention. Notice the support of the chair. So that's the whole thing. My suggestion is, if you find that useful, I suggest that you practice it when you're not stressed at all, just like you're doing it in this class with me now. Because the idea is you want it to be very familiar. So you don't have to think about it, you can just do it, right? And that comes from practice. You want to do it 4 or 5 times in the morning, 4 or 5 times in the afternoon, and even 4 or 5 times before you go to sleep if you like. And let it start becoming very, very familiar. And then try it out when you're somewhere where you feel moderately stressed. For example, maybe in a slow grocery line if you're doing grocery shopping. Or maybe if you're feeling impatient because you're waiting for the doctor and the doctor's running late. And just do it. No one knows you're doing it. And it's a great way to settle your mind again and become a little calmer. There are 2 more ways of doing it I'd like to show you rather more quickly. I don't want to use all of our time on grounding, but these are such useful exercises. I thought you might like them. So one of them is a counted breath. And this one is harder to do while you're in the middle of talking with someone, because it's going to require you to mentally count how fast or how slowly you're breathing. So it's a good one to do, for example, if you wake up in the middle of the night and maybe you just got up because you had to run to the bathroom, but then when you got back in bed, you're worrying about something, and you may want to interrupt that worrying loop that's going round and round in your mind. And this one's great for that, because you're so busy counting, you can't be thinking of thoughts that are going round and round in a circle in your mind. So the way it works is this. You breathe in for a count. I'm going to lower this a little bit. Breathe in for a count of 3 and breathe out for a count of 6. Breathe in for a count of 3, breathe out for a count of 6. I'm going to count it for you and ask you to do it. And when you're doing it, could I ask you to please sit straight enough in your chair? If you're kind of curled forward, I'm going to ask you to straighten up just a little bit, so that when you take the in-breath, you can actually expand your rib cage a little bit. Okay? And on the out-breath, it's going to be a long out-breath, so you need to get enough air in your lungs that you can do this long out-breath. And I'm going to repeat it about 5 times. The way it was taught to me by a scientist who explained how it worked, he said this is very effective for doing the same thing that your earlier grounding exercise does. It lets your nervous system know that it can go into the resilient zone. But he said it's important to really slow the breath down. And because you're slowing it down, it's not your normal rhythm of breath. So you're only asked to do it for about 60 seconds. And I think that's approximately 4 or 5 breaths. So when you're ready, you maybe let your breath out. And on the next in-breath, I'm going to count. Breathe in, 2, 3. And on the out-breath, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In, 2, 3. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In, 2, 3. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In, 2, 3. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One more. In, 2, 3. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So that's the counted breath. And I recommend it at times, like I suggested, when you're in bed at night, if you wish. But I also found that very useful at times when I'm somewhere noisy and crowded, because I find that I don't like noisy, crowded places. I get very uncomfortable in them, and I actually feel a bit of stress when I'm doing it. But I can just start doing that. Nobody knows I'm doing it. If I'm not in the middle of a conversation with someone, I could be, for example, in a grocery store or an airport or any place busy. I can just start going in, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I can do that about 5 or 6 times and find that that's very calming. So the third one I'd like to show you, I call it the heart breath. It may generally be called that, I'm not sure, but it's from a particular program called the Heart Math Program. Some of you may or may not know that one, but within that program, there is this practice I'm going to show you, and it's used as a biofeedback technique for calming the nervous system, the very same thing we've been doing. It's just another way of doing it. And the way you do it is actually imagining something. So I'm going to ask you to, just for this exercise, see if you could just pretend, just imagine that you could breathe air directly into the center of your heart, and on the out breath, breathe out directly from the center of your heart. So it's important to shift your attention. Imagine your heart right now, or your heart space. And you can imagine your biological heart, or you can just imagine the inside of your chest, or you can even imagine a pink heart-shaped balloon in your chest, whatever you like. But I'd like you to bring your attention to your chest. And you can even take a hand and place it over your heart like that. And on the in-breath, I'd like you to feel your chest expanding, and Imagine you're breathing directly into the center of your heart, and on the out breath, breathing directly out from the center of your heart. Breathing in directly into the center of your heart, breathing out directly out of the center of your heart. And it doesn't matter how fast or how slow you breathe. It doesn't matter if you breathe through your nostrils or through your mouth. The idea is just to keep your imagination in your heart. And again, often putting your hand on your heart can help you keep your attention there, and just do it for as long as you like. And I will share with you that that's an extremely effective biofeedback technique. And they've studied it and found that it does teach the nervous system I'm safe and okay, and it calms it down again very well. So it's another excellent technique. My suggestion to you, I've shown you 3 things. Choose one that you like and practice that one and see if you can get really good at it. And if you get good at it and you want to try one of the others, go ahead and practice the second one. And then you'll have those all in your toolbox to use whenever you like. So I'm going to move aside from that, but it's a great place to start because you're learning not only an immediate skill you can use in many different circumstances, it also teaches us, to direct your attention to a particular place. And that directing our attention and noticing is a very useful skill. And in fact, the word noticing preceded everything I just taught you. I asked you to notice feeling stressed. I used that as the example. And from that, we did the grounding exercise. So I would say in your own life, once you've practiced one or more of these tools enough that you feel like, oh, I'm kind of comfortable with how this works, I could try it out when I need it, then I'm going to ask you, notice when you're feeling stressed. The word notice is really important. So I would like you to notice. If you don't notice, what happens? If you don't notice, then we just react in old ways that may not be very skillful. They may not help us calm down. So we want to be able to choose how we respond. I call it responding instead of reacting. We want to choose how we respond. And in order to give ourselves a choice, we need to notice what's going on. Otherwise, we're kind of down the rabbit hole, right? So we are lost in our story, lost in our old habits. And this may be a new habit that you're beginning to develop. So I wish you well with practicing grounding. I hope that these grounding exercises will be useful to you. And I will say something to you that I always tell people when I'm teaching these. No one knows if these will be helpful to you but you. You're the only one that can decide that. So I really recommend trying them out, seeing for yourself what works for you. And if you go, oh, I think that one might be helpful, then go for it. Go ahead and practice. That would be great. So from there, I'd like to move to a subject that I find very fascinating and important in all of our lives as kind of a base place from which to talk about many subjects. But I'm going to start with emotions. We talked about the idea of connection being one of the elements of resilience. And I can't figure out how we can have connection with people or even with ourselves without having our emotions get involved. I bet that won't surprise you. So what I'd like to do is share with you some very basic facts about emotions. I hope none of these will come as a surprise, although I may frame them just a little bit differently than you're used to, or not. You'll have to listen and see. I learned this in a whole course that I learned to teach that was called Emotional Balance, Mindfulness-Based Emotional Balance. And I thought, my goodness, that is so important. I'm so glad to know that. So there's a whole realm of the science of emotions that I wouldn't begin to cover in what I'm going to tell you now. But there are a few facts that have to do with how all of us experience emotions that are just helpful to understand on an everyday basis. One of them is that emotions for humans, I won't say this is true for dogs and cats, although I can't be sure. I know they have emotions, but I'm not sure they can be aware that they're having the emotions. We can. We humans have this ability to have an emotion and to know that we're having it. Okay. So if you think about it, for example, I could be really sad and grieving about something, and I could understand that I'm grief struck, that I'm sad. I could know that. Or I could be really, really angry, really upset and angry about something. And I could realize that I'm angry. I probably don't because I'm too busy being angry. And I like to give an example. Some of you, if you've heard me talk before, you've probably heard me talk about my older brother, David. And I will talk about him a few times in this little section on emotions because it's fun to use a personal example. And many of you may have brothers or sisters or partners that you can relate to in the same way. But my brother's 3 years older than I am. And when I was much, much younger, when I was 10 and he was 13, naturally, he would tell me what to do and I would get angry with him. So even now, as much as I love him and we're very close and he's a wonderful brother, but if I talk with him on the telephone, which is usually how I'm talking with him because he's back in, across the country from me, sometimes we just have a great conversation and sometimes he'll start telling me what to do again and I'll get angry just like I'm 10 years old again. So let's pretend I'm getting angry with my brother David and pretend that I'm on the telephone talking with him. I'm really angry because he's telling me what to do. So I can just be angry with him, in which case I know precisely how to behave when I'm angry with my older brother. I've been doing it all my life, right? I know how to get angry or, quote, pissed off, quote, or whatever it is. You jerk, you shouldn't be saying that. I know how to do that. However, I can, if I choose, I can notice what's going on and I can be aware that I'm angry. So I might hear David starting to boss me around and tell me what to do. And I could notice silently, right? I'm not telling him this, but in my own mind, I could say, oh, this is anger, So it's not being angry that I'm angry, which is something I'm good at saying, by the way. Oh, I'm so angry, I'm angry. No, it's going, oh, I get it. I get it. That's really what it's saying. I get what's happening. I get it. I'm feeling angry. That's what's going on, right? So I'll back away from that. We'll come back to that in a little bit, but I wanted to just point out in a fairly illustrative way, if that's the right word for it, that we can have a strong emotion and be aware of it at the same time. It involves having a curious voice about it. And when we practice, I'm going to ask you to practice that. The curious voice is important because it's not an emotional voice, and it gives me a little bit of perspective. So that was fact number one. Fact number two is when emotions are studied by the scientists, they have found that emotions in general come in waves. Have you ever heard anyone say they've had waves of grief or waves of anger or waves of fear? It's the natural way that emotions occur. Now we can stop them from coming in waves. We can make them stand still. It's hard, but we can do it. One of the ways we can make them stand still is by telling ourselves the same story over and over. For example, if I start telling myself over and over why I'm angry about something, it's called rumination. I bet some of you know what that's like. I can keep myself angry for a long, long time. But if I don't do that, it's going to eventually, the wave is going to dissipate. It'll happen. It may come back later because it's coming in a wave, but it'll start small. It'll grow stronger. It'll get up to a peak where it's at its strongest, and it'll come down again, and it'll start receding. That's true for every emotion. We can't really make them stay forever, no matter what it is. Even happiness, I can't make myself stay happy every minute, even if I'm intensely happy. And if I want it to remain, it's going to fade away and then it'll come again because emotions come in waves. The third fact, when an emotion is at its very strongest, when it's at its peak, the emotion is said to be refractory. That's the word the emotion scientists use for it. It's kind of an unusual word. But what they mean is when the emotion's at its peak. And they say when it's at its peak, when it's at its strongest, our perception, the people that are having the emotion, our perception becomes narrowed or gated. And we really believe the emotion's true. And we don't believe anything else that doesn't agree with the emotion. So I'll use the example with my brother again. Let's pretend that I'm on the telephone with my brother, and let's say I'm really, really angry. And let's pretend that Mel is visiting me, And let's pretend that she knows my brother and she knows I love him, but she tiptoes in the room and she sees me getting angry. And she says to me, Judy, your brother is such a jerk. And if she said that to me while I'm angry, I would look at her. Of course, my brother can't see this, right? He's on the telephone. And I would say to her, yes, because I would be happy that she understands how I feel right now. It doesn't have to do with what's true. My brother's, well, I guess he can be jerky sometimes, but I wouldn't say he's generally a jerk. He's generally a good guy. So it doesn't have to do with what the facts are. It has to do with my feeling. My strong feeling is he's a jerk. And what I'm believing is when Mel confirms that. She says what my feeling is. Oh, he's a jerk. And I say yes. Now, let's pretend that Mel is quite different and says something quite different to me. And she tiptoes into the room. And again, pretending that Mel knows my brother and she knows he's a good guy and she knows I love him. Suppose she starts whispering to me, even when I'm at my angriest. She says, Judy, you really love your brother. He's really a good guy. You shouldn't feel like that. How do you think I feel? I would probably say to her, get away, get out of here. I don't want to hear that right now, because what I believe right now is that he's a jerk, right? That's what's meant by refractory. And it can apply to any emotion. It can apply to grief. When I'm in the midst of feeling really strong grief, the only thing that I believe is true is that grief. So I find it so helpful to understand that, because, for example, I'll give a different example. Let's pretend my husband and I are having an argument right before it's time to go to sleep. And I am one of those people, I say, oh, I don't want to ever go to sleep angry. I shouldn't do that. So I want to have a conversation with him about whatever our argument's about so we can solve whatever we're annoyed about. But let's say we're both really angry. It's a terrible time to have a discussion, because if I am at my angriest, I believe anything I think is true. And if he's at his angriest, he's going to believe anything he thinks is true. We're probably not going to have a very logical conversation. Maybe I should say, oh, let's have a cup of tea, and in 20 minutes, if we can stay awake that long, then we'll have a conversation. So I love knowing that. And I love knowing that when I'm in a really strong emotion, understanding it will pass. I need to allow it to pass and give it a little time, but it will pass. So those are the three main things that I consider important facts to understand about emotions. One is that I can be aware I'm having one. Two is that it is, oh, excuse me one moment. Mel, can you mute? Yeah. So just to recap the three facts that I just shared with you. The first one is that we are capable, we don't have to, but we are capable of noticing an emotion when we're having it. Number two, emotions come in waves. They start small, they get stronger, they get to the strongest, and then they recede again. They may recede quickly or they may recede slowly, but they recede again. And the third one is that when an emotion is at its strongest, we're inclined to believe that it's true. Our perception becomes narrowed so that we believe that what our emotion is steady state truth, where in actuality, it's just true right this minute while I'm feeling it the most. So it may be based on facts that are true, I don't know, but the emotion itself is not steady state. So given that understanding of how emotions work, what I find to be very useful is an exercise where we can learn to, and it takes practice, we can learn to notice an emotion when it's happening, and then give ourselves a little bit of capacity to understand what's going on and make a skillful choice about how we can allow it to soften again. So I'd like to teach you that right now. And for us to do that, I'm going to ask you to bring something to mind. Could you please bring to mind, and it's okay to close your eyes if that makes it more helpful. I'd like you to notice something that occurred, let's say in the past 24, 48 hours, where you can remember having felt a somewhat strong emotion. And I will say the same thing I said before. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd like you to choose a memory of an emotion that you felt at about a level 4. So strong enough that you can identify what it is, and not so strong that it totally distracts you or derails you. So take a moment and see if you can remember something that occurred in the last 24, 48 hours. Notice what emotion you were feeling. Notice what was going on. Maybe what was causing you to feel that emotion. And now, while you're sitting here quietly, pretending that that memory is occurring at the moment, I'd like you to see if you can silently name the emotion in a curious and interested voice. For example, oh, this is anger. Just like that. That tone of voice it's important, the tone of voice you bring to this. So please try that with whatever the emotion is. So again, repeating what I want you to do, I want you to silently name the emotion in a very curious, interested voice. Oh, this is fear. So that you can allow yourself to really notice what it is. Okay. So the second part of this exercise is to see, while you're noticing that sensation of fear or the sensation of anger or the sensation of grief, whatever you've brought to mind, I'd like you to see if you can do a mental scan of your body. Just allow your imagination to move from your head to your throat, to your chest, to your belly. See if you can notice anywhere in your body that feels a little bit of tension associated with that emotion. For example, some people say when they're afraid of something, they might feel a knot in their bellies. Or they might, when they're angry, they might feel tightness in their chest or the jaw, or even the shoulder blades or the shoulders. Or when they're feeling sad, a lot of people feel that in their throat or in their heart, behind their eyes. So it's different times. It's different for different people. There's not a right way to feel it in your body, but it's very, very helpful if you can identify a place in your body where you feel the emotion. And I'll tell you why in a couple minutes, but I'd like you to try to find a place. So again, please scan your bodies. Remember the memory that you've brought to mind, and then allow your imagination to go to your head, behind your eyes, move downward into your jaw, into your throat. Is there anywhere you're feeling a little tightness or tension associated with that emotion? Move down into your chest, your heart area, down into your belly. So if you feel one area, I'd like you to notice, oh, okay, it's my belly, or okay, it's my chest, or whatever it is. If you don't notice any area, I'd like you to just choose one that you think would make sense to you for that emotion. I know that sounds silly, but this actually works. I want you to pick an area of your body that you think would be tight or might be tight with this kind of an emotion. I'll give you an example that will surprise you. I was doing this exercise once with someone who was very upset about her diagnosis and very angry about it. She's a physician, by the way. And she said, I don't feel it anywhere. I said, okay, well, do you feel it in your brain? She said, yeah, I do feel it in my brain. I said, okay, pretend your brain's a muscle. And that worked. It worked for her, and she could do the rest of the exercise. So pick an area where you feel it. And oh, by the way, if you, like some of us, feel it in 3 different places, like, oh, I feel it in my throat and I also feel it in my belly, pick the one that feels the strongest to you, or which one you want to say, that's the stronger one. So notice that I'm asking you to pick a place in your body. By the way, if that was at all challenging to find a place, I want to share with you as an aside that you might enjoy. Guess who's really, really, really good at finding where they feel emotions in their bodies? If you haven't already come up with this, I'll tell you. It's little kids, kindergartners. They're great at finding where they feel an emotion. If you ask them what emotion they feel, they usually can come up with it right away. And if you say, where do you feel it in your body? They'll say, oh, it feels tickly inside my belly. I mean, I'm being silly, of course, but they usually are quite good at this. I think as we grow up, we lose that connection. But the fact is, there is somewhere in our body that generally does become, it reflects the emotion in some way. So I'll give you one more example. 2 years ago, I was having some surgery, and the night before, I felt nervous, and I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't read, and I couldn't do anything because I felt too nervous. And I thought, well, I'm going to do that exercise because there's nothing else I can do, and I just want to distract myself. And so I said, oh, this is fear. And then I went, where do I feel it in my body? I thought, well, that's easy. I felt a knot in my stomach. I knew where I felt it. And once I had that, I could direct my attention to my belly. And that's what I'm going to ask you to do. So let's pretend that we're just starting. I had to give you those groundwork pieces first. But I'm going to ask you to say a word and repeat it 3 or 4 times silently. And then I'm going to give you a second word to do the same thing and a third word. And they all have to do with softening the emotion. And this exercise was developed by some psychologists at Cal Berkeley and at Harvard, and it's a really good exercise, but it takes using your imagination, and it takes connecting with a place in your body. So let's start from the beginning. I'll walk you through it. Bring to mind a memory of an emotion that you could feel at about a level 4. Remember the circumstances of what was going on, what made you feel that way, what the emotion was. See if you can feel that emotion in your memory right now. And now silently name the emotion by saying, oh, this is blank. You fill in the blank, what the emotion is. Please remember to use the curious, interested voice that actually is important in this exercise. Oh, this is anger. Or, oh, this is fear. So do that. And now I'd like you to notice where you feel that additional tension or tightness somewhere in the body. And I'd like you to direct your attention to that location in your body. It could be your belly, your chest, your throat, your jaws, behind your eyes, between your shoulder blades, anywhere you feel it. Let your imagination picture that part of your body. Continue to picture that part of your body or direct your attention there. And I would like you to repeat silently, not out loud, silently repeat the word soften, 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 soften. And continue to imagine that part of your body. And now take your hand or both of your hands and put them over that place on your body. So I'm going to ask you to open your eyes, look at my 2 hands. I'm going to put them on when I was feeling afraid before surgery, my belly felt it. So I put my hands there. I'm going to ask you to put your hands there or here, or wherever you're feeling the emotion. If it's between your shoulder blades, it'll be tricky, but you can do that. Put your hand in the place where you are imagining. Continue to imagine that part of your body. And now say the word soothe, 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 soothe. So you're comforting. Your brain is hearing you and feeling you comfort your body associated with that emotion. Now it's okay to put your hand down if you like, or you can even keep your hand there. I'd like you to say the word, continue to imagine that location in your body and say the word allow, allow. And that means that you're going to allow the emotion to be there as long as it needs to, because you really have confidence it's going to go away, because all emotions go away. You don't have to get into an argument with it. You don't have to fight with it or struggle with it or push it away. And what's been found is when we just allow it to be there, it goes away a lot more easily. When we don't fight with it, then we're more relaxed and it can go away. So the whole exercise has to do with softening, really, around the emotion itself. We're first relating the emotion to a place in our bodies, and we're softening by bringing our attention to that place in our bodies, and first saying the word soften, then repeating the word soothe, and then repeating the word allow. And I will tell you, not only did I find that it worked for me that night before surgery, and I might have gotten a bit more nervous later, but I was able to doze off and on after that, which I wasn't able to do before that. And then, excuse me. Sorry, I had to clear my throat. And then the other person I wanted to tell you about that I taught this to was a physician who's a pain doctor. And she really wanted to learn it. And I thought, oh, she's such a scientist. She's not an emotion scientist, so she probably won't like this. But she loved it. She could do it right away. And she wanted to teach it to all of her doctor fellows and doctor residents. So it was very, very effective. And I know it's effective for different people that live with Parkinson's and also with their caregivers, because we've practiced this one together a lot. So that's just by way of my recommending this one, because I know it's a little different from the way we usually meet emotions, but it's extremely useful. I'd like you to remember that it starts with the word. So for your practice for this one, what I would like you to do is to see if you can begin to notice when you are experiencing a strong emotion. Just notice it and name it silently in your own mind. So you go with that curious voice, oh, this is anger. When you do that, what happens is that you allow something that the psychologists like to call cognitive perspective. And as another way to say it is, we begin to get some perspective about the fact that we're having an emotion. We're not just lost in the emotion. So we're still having it. The emotion is not disappearing. I still feel angry, or I still feel sad. I still feel whatever I feel, but I'm also aware of it. So I notice it. And that's extremely useful. Once I notice it, I can decide, oh, because I am feeling this emotion, that's what's going on. I'm going to rework my response a little bit. If I'm talking with my brother, it might mean that instead of saying, oh, you jerk, instead of that, I might want to say something that's a little bit more calm and kind. Or I might want to get off the phone right now and say, gee, can I call you back later if I can't do anything else? But at least I can prevent myself from getting into a big argument right then. And I find that's helpful. And it also helps me to soften my emotions and I can calm down. So do practice that, if you would, starting with just naming the emotions, and see if you can find where you feel the emotion in your body. And if you find you're able to do that, then go ahead and do the soften, soothe, allow part of it. So that's your second big tool. It's actually made up of several tools to put in your toolbox, and it's the one about emotions. So from emotions, I think I'd like to talk with you now about the whole idea of difficult emotions. And I would guess that all of us that are on this call are human beings. So probably every one of us has difficult emotions. And that's not just any emotion, but that's the ones that are harder to cope with, harder to experience. So looking at difficult emotions, we could call any strong emotion a difficult one. Anger is not easy. Grief is not easy, fear is not easy, but there are a couple that I'd like to focus on today because they're so important, and I think they come up in so many ways for people with Parkinson's, with people with any serious illness that goes on for a long time. Any of these that I've just named do, but I'd like to focus particularly first, I think, on the one of sadness and the whole idea of helplessness. Which what does that mean in terms of an emotion? Helplessness might bring up the emotion of anger when I don't get to have things be the way I want them to be. So there could be that entire concept as an emotion. So let's talk about helplessness first, and then we'll talk a bit about grief. I think they're both really important things to talk about because when we do, we can figure out, oh, well, if that's what's going on, how do I want to be with them? So looking at helplessness, well, actually, I think maybe I'll look at grief first and then helplessness. And I have a reason for that. The reason I'd like to look at grief first is that it's a difficult emotion, and the way of meeting it is very much like what we just practiced. Um, so I'd like to go through that. But first, I'd like to talk a little about what are the things we often are grieving. What are the losses we've known? And I think that fits in with helplessness, which we'll talk about after we talk about grief. So I know we're not together where I can ask you a question and you can answer it, but I will ask you in your own minds or even on a little scrap of paper you might have nearby, see if you can jot down some of the things that you can think of right now that you might feel that you're feeling some grief about because these are losses in your life that come along with experiencing this difficult illness of Parkinson's. What are some of the things that you feel are not the same, that you feel sad about? So I find it's really when I'm talking with people and I can hear their voices and they can tell me how it is to do that, it's actually helpful to notice and think about what they are and to say what they are or to write them down, because then we're not just feeling like I just need to get through this and not think about it. It's allowing us to really look at it and to figure out how can I be with that in a way that's helpful. So take a few moments and I'll be quiet. You write a few things down, and then I'll tell you some of the ones that I've heard people say to me in the past. So go ahead and write. Now that you've had time to write a few things down, I'm going to share with you a few of the things that I often hear people say. And they may be some of the things you've written down, or they may be different, but it's just a way of our having this conversation in a way, with me being the person that's doing the talking. So one of the things may be simply not being able to do things by myself, for myself anymore. Maybe I can't just get up and go out when I feel like it and go to the gym by myself and come back without having to tell someone where I'm going and get help with getting there and get help with getting in the door. I can just do it by myself. I used to. Maybe I can't do that anymore, and that could be really frustrating to me. Maybe I find it really hard if I'm experiencing freezing a lot, that I need to even worry about that. And that can be a real loss, and that's hard to have to worry about it and to figure out ways to be with it. Another one might be feeling a very difficult one might be feeling the loss of feeling as though no one is looking at me like I'm different. You know, perhaps I have some of the symptoms of Parkinson's that might be a tremor, or they might be the freezing. And those are things that maybe people that are out in the world don't necessarily understand, or they don't know what's happening, or I feel like they're looking at me. So that's a loss of just simply that autonomy and anonymity. Maybe I feel like that's a loss. Another loss may simply be not being able to take my own medicines, or arrange my own day, or do my own housekeeping, Or maybe there's special things in my life that I used to like to do that I can't do anymore. Maybe I used to be a runner, or maybe I used to be a bike rider, or maybe I used to be a dancer. There may be many things that I can't do, or I can't do them in the same way. There may be ways of adapting to many of these things. Whatever it is, these are losses. And I think it's really important to notice, again, we're back to the N word, to notice what's going on when I feel the frustration or the sadness of the losses that I'm experiencing. Maybe I feel that my relationships with people are different than they used to be. Maybe with my care partner, maybe with my children, maybe with my buddies. So any of these losses or changes are a very big deal, and they're very hard to have change, particularly because they change our lives in so many ways. And so what happens when we feel either the frustration or the sadness? I will share with you something that won't surprise you a bit. Most of us are really, really good at powering through things that are hard, powering through the strong things, sort of sucking it up and being strong and just managing to get through it without wanting to spend a lot of time on how hard this is. And yet, what's been found is that it's really important to notice what's going on, why it's difficult, and how we can learn to be with this, if at all, in a way that will work. So it starts with noticing, and that's what I'm asking you to do first. And you may think of things that are on your list that didn't even occur to me, and I hope you did, because I think this is a very personal exercise, and it's quite important to notice the things that are true for you, and to realize this matters, this is hard. And then I want you to realize that this is something that is fairly hard for everyone that has a serious illness. There are losses. So you could think everyone has difficult moments. So these are really difficult moments, and everyone has difficult moments. And then you might even think as well, and we'll come back to this, of ways that you may want to allow the losses and the difficult moments to inform your experience and to advise you of, oh, I get what's going on, and I want to think about how I respond to the people in my life while I'm going through this. Because sometimes we respond without thinking to something that's hard in a way that might make us feel cross or grumpy. Those are gentle ways of saying harsh. We might behave harshly with people we love, and then afterward we realize, oh my gosh, the last thing in the world I wanted to do was be harsh with them. These are the people I love. So let me think about how I can be with this difficulty. Perhaps it's by understanding this is hard, and also understanding that it's human. Any human would feel this way going through these difficult things. It's not just me. It's very important to realize that, because it helps us realize we're not alone. It's not just me being alone in this. And then it's, what do I want to learn from it? And that might be how do I want to be with people I love, even though this is really hard? And then I want to come back to this very idea of grief itself, because grief is an emotion. Just as we were earlier saying, sadness is an emotion, anger is an emotion, fear is an emotion. You might think of them as like primary colors, like blue and yellow and red. And if you think of those primary colors, we know that there are shades of those colors. So pink is a shade of red. And purple, well, purple's a mixture. And we have mixed emotions too. But we might say dark brown is a shade of medium brown. Or let's go back to the primaries. Navy blue is a shade of blue, or light blue is a shade of blue. So we get primaries and we get the shades of the primaries. The same is true for the primary emotions. So if a primary emotion is sadness, a shade of that emotion might be grief. A shade of fear might be nervousness, or it might be anxiety. A shade of anger might be irritation, or it might be fury. And there are many, many shades of each of the primary emotions. So think of grief as a shade of sadness. It's one of the flavors that it can come in, and it's fairly extreme. It's at the stronger level. So when you're feeling grief, when we talked about a wave of emotion, grief is sadness when it goes up to its strongest point. It becomes grief, and it becomes very strong. And what can we do with it that will help us move forward? We can be aware of it the same way we were aware of the less strong emotions. We can mentally say in our own mind, oh, this is grief. I mean, we may still need to have a good cry. That's fair. But we also can notice it and say, oh, this is grief. And where do I feel it in my body? And you might feel it in your throat and chest or heart. And you can notice that it's there. And allow your imagination to go to that location in your body and allow yourself to soften around it and to soothe it and to allow it. And that will help the wave of grief to soften. And it's much more effective than just trying to shut it down. Somehow the brain doesn't agree with wanting us to shut things down. It doesn't quite let us do that. So I would say the most important thing about grief is to notice it. That's first. To name it. To find it in the body. To soften around it. To soothe it. And to allow it. And then you might even want to reframe it. When you think about giving yourself a positive message about it, you might want to reframe it and say, this grief is letting me really understand what's going on. It's really helping me to see how hard this is. How do I want to be with this in a way that works better for me? Yes, I need to cry right now, but how do I want to work with this? No, I can't run anymore. What can I do that would feel good to me? And what is really important to me? And who are the people that I love that I want to share some of this with? So these are all things we can do with the difficult emotion of grief, but it really starts with allowing ourselves to notice it. And interestingly, what's been found in the research is that if we notice it sooner rather than later, then we're able to adapt to it in a way that actually is healthy. And the healthy adaptation is just what I was just talking about. It's how can we find ways to be aware of these losses, which let me realize, yeah, this is what's going on. Yeah, this is hard. And then how can I be with this in a way that allows me to live with this in a way that I want to, and still to be doing what I want to do with the people that I love, and still connecting with the people I love. So I will go forward from grief to helplessness because many of these areas of loss also make us feel a sense of helplessness, which is why I wanted to do helplessness as the next tool that I'd like you to have in your toolbox, not the helplessness, but a way of meeting it. And this is a particular exercise that's called Renew. And Renew is an acronym that stands for 5 different things, RENEW, each of which I will tell you as we go through them. But what it has to do with is this: when I'm feeling helpless, and there are a lot of things that may make any one of you or any one of us feel helpless, but Parkinson's, I think particularly, can make us feel really helpless. Holy cow, look at this thing that I can't do. I used to always be able to do that and I can't. And it may cause us to feel frustrated. It may cause us to feel grief around it. And certainly it may cause us to feel helpless. And I want to remind you that from the earlier part of our talk, we were talking about the 3 areas of resilience. And the third one is the opposite of helplessness. It's the idea of choice. What can I choose even when I feel helpless. I can't feel choice to make this go away. I can't make Parkinson's disappear. I wish I could, and I wish every one of you could. But if I can't, what can I do that will help me to be with Parkinson's in a way that will let me live my life in a way that I like a whole lot better? So Renew is one of these exercises, tools for your toolbox, that I think can be very useful. So the R of Renew stands for recognize. And I bet you won't be surprised to hear that, because recognize is just the same as notice. You need to notice it's happening. Oh, this is helplessness. So I think you can bring that same quality that you used for emotions to helplessness, to notice what's happening. Oh, this is helplessness. I get it. And then the next step, the E of Renew, is embrace. You just say, okay, it's helplessness. I'm going to take this on. And just put your arms around and say, I get it. It's helpless. And while I'm embracing it, I'm going to notice how I'm reacting to helplessness. Am I getting really frustrated and angry? Am I getting really sad and apathetic? I mean, these are all emotions we might feel on a continuum. So depending on my mood on a given day, or depending on what I'm feeling helpless about, I might feel any of those ways. But it's really useful for me to notice, what is this making me feel? Where am I with this? Am I feeling overactive, where I'm trying really hard to make it change? I'm trying to make this be different, and getting angry about it. Or I'm feeling like I'm feeling just resigned. I'm feeling just like I want to drop out and get away from it. And that's hard, because then I'm not doing anything about it, and I'm just sinking into it more. So first I noticed this is helplessness. Second, I embrace it. What is it that I'm feeling? Where am I on this continuum? Am I getting angry about it, or am I feeling resigned about it, or am I feeling sad about it? And then I want to go to N, nurture. What can I do that will help me feel a little bit more nurtured in the midst of this very hard thing? And nurturing would be where you ask yourself to bring to mind something that you know nurtures you. And I'm not talking about a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, although for some people that might be just the right thing. But I'm talking about emotionally, what nurtures you. And it might be, and I'm going to give you some examples, it might be remembering someone in your life who inspires you. So maybe you want to bring to mind your partner, or your teacher from the 4th grade, or an inspiring religious figure, or an inspiring social figure like the Dalai Lama, or someone that you find inspiring, Mother Teresa. Or it might be a grandparent that you thought was a good person, who has always inspired you in your life. So you may want to bring someone like that to mind that may help you to feel nurtured. Or you might want to bring to mind a place that you find helps you feel nurtured. It might be being by the ocean, or being in the mountains. And you might want to close your eyes and just picture that place that you know so well, and that you love, and where you've gone in the past, in your earlier life maybe, and that has always made you feel happy when you've been there. Maybe it's in the high desert. Maybe it's in, you name it, you decide where. Maybe it's, you remember being with someone that you love, that you just enjoy because they make you happy. Being around your grandchildren, your children, a good friend that you haven't seen for a long time. So the N of Renew is, you are going to nurture yourself by bringing to mind something that makes you feel resourced. It brings you the resources of the good memories and feelings in your heart of remembering that person or place or thing that you were doing, whatever it might be. That's the N. And then the E of Renew is embodying a different attitude. So the first attitude was that feeling of being helpless. You may have felt frozen. You may have felt, crumped, like sort of desolate. And I'm doing this to show you shoulders going down and forward. You have any number of physical ways of responding to helplessness, but this is asking you to embody a different attitude, a more proactive way of being with this. And it might be calmness, it might be straightening your body, straightening your shoulders. You could even do a grounding exercise where you take a breath in and notice the sensation of the air entering your nostrils, and then direct your attention to noticing the sensation of the support of the chair. All of those will help you embody a calmer place in your heart and in your body. And the W of renew stands for weave, W-E-A-V-E, to weave a different story. I'm feeling helpless, but I'm going to look at this in a very different way. I'm feeling inspired by thinking of someone or something that I love. I'm feeling physically embodied and a little bit more comfortable in my body and grounded. And now I'm going to weave that story. Whatever I'm feeling helpless about, I'm going to think, how could I do this anyway in a different way? Or how could I feel actually lovingly cared for by someone that's doing something for me? And I'm going to let them. And I'm not only going to let them, I'm going to be happy that they can be doing something for me that will make them feel good, and me too. I will thank them and remember how good it is to allow them in my life to do this thing for me in a way that feels that they don't feel like they're stepping on my toes, that they can feel good about it, and I can feel good about it. And I can just enjoy bringing someone closer to me instead of pushing someone away. So that's one way you could weave a different story. Another way to weave a different story might have to do with an activity that you can't do in the same way, but you actually can still do it in a different way. For example, I'm thinking of the Parkinson's dance classes, if you're able to do something like that, or the rock steady boxing, or the exercise for people with Parkinson's. It may not look exactly like what you used to do 20 years ago, but it may really not only be fun, but it would be good for you, for your health, good for your Parkinson's, and it just may be wonderful for your state of mind. So that's the Renew exercise or protocol, and I really would encourage you to try it out and play around with it. I find that it's extremely helpful to me personally. All of these things are. I never teach anything that I don't find useful myself, but I also know that I can't assume that everything that I like will be something you like, so I really want you to see for yourself what works for you. And again, I want to just remind you that the three components of resilience. The first is your intention, and that's a positive intention. I know we didn't really focus on that today, but remember that you can think about something good for others, and that will actually strengthen you. When you want them to be happy, it helps you be less anxious, and it helps you to be more grounded. So always a good thing to do. And the second area is the whole area of connection, connecting with people you love, and also understanding that you can understand how your emotions work, and practice naming emotions and practice softening around them. And then that very large emotion of grief, it's allowing yourself to really recognize what are the losses and how can I be with them? And you can bring to it again that whole exercise around emotions, and also rethinking how you want to reframe the grief in terms of something that you can do now. And then the last part is that whole idea of renew, where you recognize helplessness. All of these are choices that you can make within your life so that you are countering the idea of helplessness with a proactive choice. So, for example, if I'm feeling frozen, I could choose to ground myself, and that might help you soften sooner. Or if I'm feeling a strong emotion. So at this point, I think I'm just repeating things, but I hope that these practices will be useful to you, and that you'll try them out in your own good time, in your own life. And again, if something works for you, practice it. I believe the saying, are we done? Hi, Mel.
Yeah, well, go ahead. Were you going to finish? Were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say the expression that I've seen used is, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice.
Right.
So thank you so much for letting me come into your lives now.
Thank you so much, Judy. I love everything that you shared, and the practices are so important. And every time that we've shared these with our community, with people with Parkinson's or their care partners, we have received so much feedback that it has been helpful for them on this path. So I hope that more and more people can learn the practices that you shared and use them throughout their journey, and then share them with others. Because like you said, yes, this is very, very helpful for people with Parkinson's, for anybody who's caring for somebody with Parkinson's, but it's also, a great thing for us to do in our own lives. We all have difficult emotions that we have to deal with, and the better we are able to handle them, the better we'll be when we come across somebody who's dealing with something much more difficult than we are. And I think that's a really important point. So thank you so much, Judy. I'm excited to share this with everybody. And anyone, if you have a question about this or any of the content that we talked about, please email me at blog@dpf.org. And I'll be sure to share a bunch of the notes and a bunch of the exercises when I post this video.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks for letting me into your living rooms. This is right. It's great.